Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Happy New Year, happy Lunar New Year, and welcome to our first Event Tech forecast of the year. I'm Luke Bilton, I'm Chief Growth Officer at ExpoPlatform, and I'm joined today by a fantastic panel of experts to discuss what's coming up in the year ahead. We want to make this session really interactive, so please do comment in the right side of LinkedIn there. And we'll be using Slido too as we go along. So there'll be a couple of polls we'd like you to answer. But as a quick intro to what this next 60 minutes is going to be about, the Event Tech Forecast is our ongoing study of the evolution of the events industry and the changing technology needs of the industry. And the idea being to help you as event organisers to keep pace with a changing market. The survey responses from this survey were made up of exhibition and large-scale conference organisers, and to give you a flavour of some of the respondents and those who contributed, here on the screen are some of the logos. I want to point out here that some of these businesses here, in fact, many of them, have a healthy media component to their organisation as well, which is important because one of the things we're going to be talking about as part of today's webinar is digital revenue. And when we come to the digital revenue forecasts, some of it, to me anyway, look as though it's on the high side for pure play events. And I think some of that is attributable to the media mix of advertising and subscription revenue that some of these organisers have. The report itself, along with all of our ebooks and research, can be downloaded from expoplatform.com resources, but anyone who's joined us today will be sending out this report to all of you anyway. We've got a great panel who are here today to discuss all of this. But before we get there, what I'm going to do first is go through some of the top line findings of the report and then hand over to the panel to discuss their take on some of these results, what stands out to them, and how savvy organisers can make the most of these challenges and opportunities. So to start with then, I wanted just to give a bit of market context to the general market conditions with event technology. So one of the first things I think to put all of this into context is where we're at now at the start of 2023. If you look at Google Trends, worldwide Google Trends, you can see that virtual event searches have fallen by 80% since their peak in September 2020. In the same way, searches for hybrid events, which peaked a bit later, they peaked in January 2022, they've also dropped by around about 50% from where they were peaking. As I think, as Dahlia calls it, the Corona coaster, and everyone moved to virtual events, and now very much back into live events, or a mixture of live and some digital. One of the important points here, though, I think, is that yes, virtual has fallen since its peak, but an important point here is that searches for virtual events are still up by 6 times versus what they were pre-pandemic levels. Hybrid event searches are up 4 times what they were pre-pandemic. So it's not at the peak, but it's certainly fast-tracked and accelerated the adoption of virtual events. So that's something which we might touch on. Going hand in hand with that, as virtual event searches have dropped, what we're seeing is a real ramp up in mobile app adoption at live events. And in fact, there's various studies around this. Generally, mobile app adoption at events seems to be between 2 to 3 times what it was pre-pandemic. And it does seem like the pandemic really has accelerated the use of various different technologies around matchmaking, product discovery, messaging, all of those kind of features which are now indispensable for events. And you can see that in the way that mobile app adoption has really ramped up. So those are a couple of things to bear in mind, some of the mega trends over the last couple of years. Another important context here is the leadership context. And by that, I mean the tech savvy of event organisers themselves. I really like this from Barisone as a way to illustrate the way that attitudes towards digital have oscillated between digital being the most important issue that faces organisers, swinging all the way back to digital being worthless. And depending who you speak to, I think lots of these comments certainly ring true for me. And you have over the last few years heard people saying a lot of these things. The reason I've tilted this to the side is that digital being an enabler is something which I think has consistently increased and will continue to increase. And so this is something which I think as attitudes towards digital oscillate between the two. Generally, digital enablement of live events is something that does continue to be on the up and up. I'd also want to throw in a stat from Skift Meetings here, which is that 74% of event organisers say that they're using more tech than previously, which I think again emphasises this. The whole COVID pandemic has really accelerated the use of technology by event organisers. So let's go on to the survey results. So if we look at this, so this is one of the first questions that we asked in this report, is what are, for the year ahead, what are the key event technology features for you? And here you can see the way that organisers have ranked them from most important all the way through to least. And it's probably no surprise, given what we've already discussed, but mobile apps come out as the number one tech feature for the year ahead. And we did a similar survey around 12 months ago. And in that, mobile apps were probably about the third or the fourth in terms of importance. So we can see that mobile apps for 2023 really have shot to the top. In the survey we did last year, the number one thing was on-demand content, on-demand streaming of content, post events, and also simultaneous hybrid streaming was also a lot higher up. Both of those really have fallen back, but particularly on-demand content, which was last year's number one feature. So if on-demand content has slipped back, mobile app adoption clearly has ramped up. And some of the things on the far end, like hosted buying, location-based analytics and notifications, I don't think it's out there unimportant, but it's that it's not important to all events. So some events clearly specialize in hosted buying, get a huge amount of value from that, but not everybody. Whereas mobile apps supported with AI matchmaking, lead retrieval are things which are applicable to all events of all shapes and sizes. So mobile apps coming up right at the top. In terms of the biggest opportunities for event technology to develop, the number one thing that came out from our survey was community and community nurturing. So that's been a theme over the last couple of years, something that's been discussed a lot. And going into 2023, the respondents said that was the number one opportunity as they saw it, followed closely by using technology to prove ROI for exhibitors. So again, coming back to leads and monetization as well were the top three. But community was number one, something that we will be talking about shortly. Then we looked at challenges. So what are the key tech challenges facing event profs? And the number one thing, and this was the number one thing actually last time, was around being able to deliver a seamless experience. And a lot of organizers talk about having to chain together 5, 6, 7 different technologies and try to integrate them for themselves. So that's a real challenge, clearly, and an ongoing challenge. And particularly as we go through this roller coaster, the needs keep on changing, the platforms keep on evolving, and being able to deliver a seamless experience is something which is a challenge. And a lot of people, when I speak to them, just say they want it to be easy, make it easy, make it seamless. And you can see there that integration between suppliers is also highly ranked. I think they're both saying a very similar thing there. Then we move on to digital revenue. As I mentioned at the top, lots of people who completed the survey also represent media organizations. So I think that's probably why this is so high, but half expected upwards of 10 to up to 30% of their annual revenue to come from digital channels in 2023. And then another 20% more than that. So we're seeing actually, I think, very, very high levels there of digital revenue, which I don't think is reflective of people who are pure play events companies. So, but clearly an opportunity there, and that's something which we're going to discuss with the panel. 55% of respondents predicted that their digital revenue will actually increase in the year ahead, and only 5% that it will decrease. So it looks as though our respondents were feeling pretty bullish about the potential of digital to create revenues in the year ahead. So those were the survey results. Now let me welcome on stage, on the virtual stage, the panel. So Adam Parry of EventTech Live is unfortunately on his sick bed. We checked, and he's close to dying. He isn't. He's to attend. So unfortunately, Adam won't be here. But I am very pleased to say that we have Miguel Neves, editor-in-chief at Skift Meetings, who has joined us.
Howdy.
Event Tech Supremo Dahlia El Gazzar. Hi, Dahlia. Matt Coyne from Making Waves, and Chris Pendley is joining us. Chris is Director of Digital and Data from Messe Frankfurt, North America. So hello to all of you, and thanks so much for joining us. Thank you. So the first question I'd like us to talk about is around one of the most important technology, according to the respondents, was around the mobile app. It's become the #1 event technology, with technologies like on-demand and appetite for hybrid seeming to fall right back. So I think one of the first questions I'd like to ask, well, firstly, does that surprise you at all? But then probably a more interesting question off the back of that: what kind of advice would you give to organizers to really make mobile work for them? I think there's real swings in terms of people who are using mobile well, who are being successful at driving mobile adoption. So it'd be great to get some of your advice into how to make that work. And I think I'll go to Dahlia first, if that's all right. What's your advice, Dahlia?
Well, first, make sure it works. So that's number one. The other thing is it's kind of a surprise, but it's not, because event profs like to go to their comfort zone, the comfort zone of mobile apps, which if we look at like the last decade plus, we were already at mobile apps. And then we had to, because of the Corona coaster, go into virtual platforms, which actually most of the virtual platforms came from mobile app companies. So we're sort of the pendulum, if we're using that analogy, is going back to mobile apps. There is a couple of missed opportunities that if we do not get mobile apps right this time around, no matter what you do, if you're going to give them gold or money to have them use your mobile app, if you don't get it right, they are not going to download it. They are not going to use it. And we're going to be back at square one, which was 10 years ago. So number one is truly take out all the challenges and the obstacles of having the mobile app like easy to use. That's first and foremost. Number two is being very transparent on what type of data that if attendees or any users of the mobile app, what they're putting in the mobile app, what's going to be shared and what's not. Because right now, everybody is really, really just protecting their data. So privacy settings are a must. And number three is you have to figure out what you are going to put in that mobile app that is just going to be essential for any stakeholder of any event to have a great experience. And so it can't just be a program or an agenda or an attendee list. And if it's not easy to use, they're not going to use it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So some interesting points there. When it comes to what's essential, what adds value to the live experience, I wonder if anyone has seen some good examples of activations at a conference, at a trade show, something that makes those mobile apps essential. Maybe if I could ask that question to Matt, please. What have you seen that works well?
See what works well. It's a tough one because for a very long time I was a complete anti-app person in terms of event apps, and it's for many of the points that Dahlia raised, that you'd sort of go in, look around a little bit. Recommendations were pretty awful for networking. Content was non-existent, and the schedule was already on the website. So it was kind of, why do you need it? Why are you engaging with it? And so I think, like, then for me, from my perspective, it's exactly like, what's the purpose of the app? Like, what is it doing? I think in your trend report, you sort of say that AI networking is the sort of second most favorable thing, going into 2023 underneath apps. So it's, well, if networking and meetings is the thing, why isn't that facilitated more easily in the app, where someone can do it on their downtime, on their tube, train, flight, whatever the thing might be, and get them engaging more with the event in that way.
Great, thank you, Matt. Chris, what's your experience been for Messe Frankfurt in the States around use of mobile apps?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the points these guys just made. If you're not bringing any value to them, you're gonna have a lot of time, difficult time for adoption. That was what we were seeing pre-pandemic. One of the things that we've implemented since then, because of being able to, lockdown, we were having a live event in New York where the exhibitors weren't able to make it there, but the attendees could. But the exhibitors could get their products there. So we implemented this concept that we called sourcing showroom. And through the app, each of these products had its own individual QR code, and the attendees could come, the buyers could come and scan that QR code, be linked to that product on the platform, and then through that have a one-to-one meeting with that manufacturer. So that was something that we had a lot of good success with. Obviously, it's still, it's not as good as shaking that hand, but for those exhibitors that can't make it, it was a good substitute for that. So that's something now that we are back full blown having the events, the exhibitors are there. We still facilitate that to where the exhibitors now can have products and the QR codes where the attendees can scan those and save those all in instead of having to, write those down. So I think bringing that value in is what, and now we've seen the adoption rates have gone. I mean, they've gone up tenfold since pre-pandemic for that show. Things like that. And then also I think we went badgeless with that show as well. So when I say badges, printless badges. So we've implemented the badges into the mobile app to where you need the app to get onto the floor. So I think a lot, just things like that. And that also being a textile show, we could do a little PR around it, saying that we're going a little bit more sustainable, not having the badges, not having the paper that we're wasted. So I think, things like that have given us a little bit of uptick in the adoption rates. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that point about people having to have the app or some way of presenting QR codes in order to access the venue, that's a sure way to ramp up adoption. Miguel, what from your perspective, what are you seeing in this? Is there anything in the survey results which surprised you?
No, thanks for having me. I think this just reflects in many ways also the focus on in-person events. You're really kind of saying, hey, look, we're back in person, and the app is really important. And like Chris was saying, I think it's a really good example. If you make the app necessary for the event, or there's something that's really important to do that is so much better to do on the app, I think that really drives that adoption. But I think because we're thinking about that in-person experience primarily, I think most of the people that responded were probably planners of some sense and kind of linked to that in-person experience. So the app just becomes really important. But I think as the app has developed these sort of hybrid capabilities, I think what would be interesting to maybe see how this develops maybe in next year's survey is how important is that sort of virtual or live streaming, for example, capabilities within the app, if that's present, because those are the kind of things that when we talk about apps, they're very different to what they were 3 years ago. right? Yes, it's still agenda, it's still location, it's still the listing of things that usually is in some paper form somewhere else, or unless somebody's decided that there isn't going to be a paper form. And sometimes it's easier to work with the paper than it is with the app. You know, sometimes it can be very overwhelming. But I think ultimately people are looking for really seamless participation in events. And if that seamless participation is, you know, there's a QR code that gives me my badge, I'm in, I need to access something for lunch, or I need to do some networking things, the app works really well for that. Great. That's what I'm looking for. That's where I feel it can be really seamless, particularly if it reflects my preferences and things that I've selected at registration. So I think apps are back, but apps have a bit of a bad rep. And I think, as Matt was saying, there's a lot of kind of people that go, oh, I don't really want to download the app. And as Dahlia was saying, I don't know if I want my email to be out there, or notifications from this app, or all this kind of thing. So I think we're in this sort of place where apps need to prove themselves again. And we need to get participants to be really confident with apps for them to really take off as they can.
Yep.
Dahlia, anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I saw that Aid had a very interesting comment, and he's spot on, where he says all the features listed in the top 10 of the survey, the grid that you showed, are actually features of mobile apps. So the evolution of mobile apps, like Miguel was saying, they have to earn our trust back as users. But the other part of this, and Dana touched on it as well, is that this is where it plays into a community platform as well as a content platform. We have to get better as event profs in creating content that will live on a mobile app for consumption as well as for tracking, and almost like the sticky part of a mobile app.
I think it is probably also that there was some stats I was looking at from the start of this year that's just possibly worth looking at with that, because I think it's a good point, Dahlia. But there was something of, I think it was 18 to 24-year-olds on average are spending 112, 115 hours a month on apps. As you progress to sort of 45, 50-year-olds, that's about 70 hours. So it's kind of, as the age goes up, the amount of time that they're using apps goes down. So it's kind of, how much are you investing in it? If that content's in there and everything else, are you preaching to an audience that is possibly going to look at it once and disappear anyway? So I think it's really understanding the audience and who is it that's using your app is incredibly important to know if they're going to come back in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with that. We see different adoption rates based off the shows. You know, we have some shows that are a technical textile show where it's like wovens for carpet and, you know, things like that. That industry is a little bit more old school compared to even a textile show that we have coming up in New York. That's more of a fashion driven show towards a younger, like fashion, you know, the designers are coming in for buyers, and the adoption rate that we have for that show versus that technical textile is so much, there's a big gap there. And I just think it's important. Not all shows are going to need, you know, want that adoption or need it as much as the different industries that we serve are different. So
I think your point also, Chris, about having QR codes around the show as a very like visible way to make the connection between the live environment and digital is also a really important way to drive adoption.
I think being like, that's what sets us apart, right? Like we're not, and I have this battle with our corporate office a lot when we're trying to develop things in house, is we're really, really great at organizing shows. But that doesn't mean we're great at developing apps, right? But I think what sets us apart from Google or Amazon or what these guys can't do is that we do have this live event. We have something where we have an opportunity to do real life activations. So I think that we've got people that are, you know, they're taking time out of their busy schedule. They're traveling to wherever the show is for 2 or 3 days. They're there, they're active. So there's so much content that we could be taking advantage of for these guys that are ready and they want to be doing something. So where else we've seen some success with is when we've been able to turn, instead of like the home feed being the exhibitor list or just a module to take them to the floor plan or things like that, which they can always view on the, you know, the website. Those are things that we have to have. But if we turn that home feed, that homepage more into like a news feed and something very scrollable where they're used to like Instagram or Facebook, things they're already used to. And we turn that into our own social network for the show. So they can able to go in, take photos of the event, you know, post it, people can comment, check in, like it. Same thing that everyone's doing in these, the comment feeds we have here in this event. I think if you're able to take that and put that into the digital world, that's where, as event organizers, we can stand apart a little bit.
Agreed. Okay, could I ask now everyone who's viewing, we're going to, and actually let's put it on screen as well, but we're going to go to our first poll. And the question here, we've shared the link in the chat, and also there's a QR code on the screen. We're using Slido for this. And if you could just please select what are the most important reasons for you to have a mobile app for your event. We want to try here to dig in a bit more into what are some of the motivations for respondents for why mobile apps are important. So at the moment we've got floor plan and matchmaking, but I'm sure we can do better than that. So please do head over there and enter what you think is important. Okay, so we've had some more coming in around matchmaking, visitor polls and engagement, sponsorship revenues. Keep them coming, please. Interested to see what you've got.
Yeah, I like Rachel's comment. There should be an option for all of the above as well.
Yeah, that's too easy, Rachel. We need to
pick one.
Yeah, what's the most important reason here? One of the hobby horses I always have with mobile apps is around lead retrieval. I always get quite frustrated when there's a separate event app and a separate lead retrieval app. To me, that's just adding in unnecessary complexity. And I always think that there should, if you're going to do an app, just make it one, please. Just make it easy for people.
I think that assumes that it's the same company doing the app and the lead retrieval, right? And a lot of times it's not.
Yep. Which comes down to this pain point around seamlessness.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's coming up? So at the moment we've got matchmaking, floor plan navigation coming up top. Anyone on the panel want to comment on that at all? Or is that as you'd expect?
I think for me, this makes a lot of sense because matchmaking and networking, you don't want to pull out your laptop and start searching for people while you're on a show floor or while you're at a conference. You want to do that in the most handy way. So it's just a really obvious feature for the app, particular ones that are really geared towards this. I do see a lot of apps that have some sort of matchmaking or, attendee lists, but then don't make that very easy to use or don't make it searchable or make it hard to kind of find people. And that is a killer mistake because as soon as you sort of go, well, I'm just going to go online and download the PDF of everybody who's attending and that'll be easier, you've basically killed off any enthusiasm around the app. So it's really about making that front and center. And if you know that your attendees prioritize that, if that's kind of the purpose of the event is to make connections and to network, then that should be the thing that sort of loads up first in the app and hopefully even works offline if you can. If you could make it so that the attendee list is just there and you can do it on a plane, look through it, and then favorite the people that you want to meet and then arrange meetings later. Fantastic. That's something that I'm going to go back to the app to do rather than look at my emails or something like that.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And I think also just looking at the floor plan side of stuff, I think that AEO, so for those in the UK, the Association of Exhibition Organisers, they did some research, and I want to say it was 10 years ago, and they put eye tracking goggles on at the time. So they literally then analysed lots of video footage as opposed to it all being done automatically now. But they were looking at how people were looking around the trade show floor and how they were navigating. And most of them were looking up at name boards across the top of stands. So it had a stand number and a name. And it was so simple that anything else they did, it didn't matter. They were looking for name boards to see where they were. So something to be able to help pinpoint far more easily without maybe needing to install at every venue you to go to and all that kind of stuff, I think would be incredibly helpful.
Really interesting.
I think.
Okay. Sorry, go on, Dahlia.
I was going to say real quick, there's two missed opportunities in regards to the matchmaking and the networking. One is you see a lot of apps that are starting to do matchmaking between attendees, but not many do matchmaking or like AI-driven smart matchmaking between you and potential content to consume or potential like activations. within the show. So I think we need to get better at really honing in why are you attending the show? From a content perspective, what are you interested in? From an exhibitor or sponsor perspective, products, services you're interested in, as well as the attendees. And then the other opportunity, which might lend itself to stickiness on the mobile app, is really asking the question in regards to, do you intend to use the mobile app post-show? Because you get on the plane back home and you delete that damn thing because you need to have some sort of hook in it. Are your conversations going to keep on going? Do you want to continue to, consume the content on a mobile app versus on a browser? Do you want to take that step with your attendees? So there's a lot of it's an education curve on the benefits of the mobile app. And we need to get better than we were a decade ago with the mobile apps to figure out how to get people to live on it a little bit longer.
Yep.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Completely agree. Sustainability as well. It always disappoints me how low down something like sustainability is, when there is a lot of potential to have all of the paper, the lanyards, all the unnecessary stuff. If exhibitors were to cut down on bringing brochures to an event, the impact that makes, but always seems to be quite low whenever you do polls like this, even now in 2023. Anyone got any thoughts on that, on how technology can help the sustainability impact of an event?
I think we did it a few years ago. I mean, it started with a lot of the Pokken stuff, for those that remember it. Being able to collect as you went round, I think, was super simple. We put that into an app and a QR code scan, or into a badge or something. Just being able to collect stuff instead of carrying buckets of brochures to flick through on the train home, I think was obviously it reduces the amount of waste you've got. But then also, if I can make a note against that, I know what I'm actually looking at after I've spoken to 150 people in a day, and then I can reference whatever the PDF is too. So back to the app thing, if you've got something that's pulling people back to see what they've collected, see who they've met, make those connections, I think you're reducing waste, but you're also making the experience better.
Yep, agreed. Miguel, you must have a whole stack of research around sustainability from Skift.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that comes up a lot. I have to say it's not the main driver. What we keep seeing is that sustainability is obviously important, and I don't want to say that I wish that it was less, but whenever we actually do hard research about this, it's not a decision maker. It's not the thing that actually drives people to choose X or Y. And I think it should, but it's not. So I think sustainability is important, and at least the ecology part of it with the app, I think, is interesting. I wanted to make one point, and there's a lot of stuff in the chat about sort of making apps year-round and kind of something that is like a community feature. And I actually kind of disagree with that, essentially because I haven't seen great examples of that. And I would actually suggest going for a different tactic, which is really making sure that the app integrates with as many things that you use in your day-to-day life as possible. The simple example is, rather than have sort of your own separate schedule on the app, make sure that it synchronizes with your email calendar. Because when the app is like this whole separate ecosystem, it's just going to add this extra layer of stress, and it's going to be kind of work against it. So anywhere where you can create a system, even if it's just through email, where it's like, okay, you made a connection, it sends you an email and says, hey, you met this person at this location at this time, and you can add your notes, and then you can press send. Simple stuff like that works a charm, because ultimately your contacts and your email and your calendar are all kind of connected to your email. And if your app doesn't connect with all that, it's its own little program. And then depending on how many events you go, you have your own little programs multiple times. And I think that just adds a lot of stress. So I'm a fan of the opposite. I'm a fan of it integrating with your day-to-day kind of apps and your day-to-day activities as much as possible.
Yep. But I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, so if we go on to the next question, which was asked in the survey, was around the opportunities, and community was felt to be one of the big opportunities. But in the report, we had a good interview with Rob Miller, who's great expert on what it takes to understand, insight that drives a community and how to go about building one. And he makes the report that most event organizers are kind of just playing with it, really, just sort of dabbling. And if you're going to actually be successful in building a community, it can be really difficult to do that. And it's down to having the right kind of skill sets, the right kind of content strategy, resourcing it properly. So I guess it isn't just an app that people use. There has to be a reason for people to keep coming back and keep on engaging. Could I ask Chris? Could I ask you, please, what your thoughts are around community building, please, and what kind of opportunity do you see it as?
I agree with the points that it's tough to do. I mean, that's what we're looking at. I see the value of having that community to where if you're able to do it right, if you do have that content and value that's coming out year round, that you have an opportunity, I think, as the event organizer to maybe become the authority within that sector or that industry. And I think the value of that is when you have that and you've got these people engaged year round, they've already signed up for the content that you're putting out, the webinars that you're putting out, even if they're mini events. And we've dabbled with maybe doing pop-ups and more localized, smaller events, and doing things like that throughout the year where you got these guys engaged. When it comes time for the big exhibition, that I think the barrier of entry is going to be a little bit lower, right? So if they've already, right now, the top of the funnel or the main focus is the trade show, and everything that we put out is driving to that when it comes to registration, everything. So it all feeds down from the big event that's 2 or 3 days, to where I think if you're fostering that community and we put it more brand centric, and then we're putting out webinars, or we're putting out surveys, we're putting out, these mini events throughout the year, and these guys are already registered for that community piece of it. Then when it comes time for the big exhibition or that 3-day event, it's easy just to push them down into that funnel. You've already captured all of their data, all of the registration. So I see the value of that. To Miguel's point, though, and what you brought up, it's difficult to do. I mean, that's something we've been talking about, and I hear it at every conference I go to. Community 365 community, and everybody, I think they see the value. We see the value in it, but I think it's a hard thing to do. I think you're competing with a lot of content out there, and guys that's all they do. You got these media companies that's all they do is put out publications and content and Facebook, and you're not just competing with the trade show organizers anymore. I'm competing with these big media groups, and people's attention span is very low these days, and I think it's a very difficult thing to do. So I think it sounds good, and I see the value. If someone can figure it out, or if we can figure it out, and it's still we're focusing on it. We're going to try to just keep an eye on it, because I do think it'll get there. But I think you have to have the content strategy and what you're going to do. You can't just say, I want to open a community. Even if you have the right platform and it works well and it's seamless, people aren't going to use it if there's no value there. Yeah.
Dahlia, what advice would you have for Chris, or someone in Chris's position?
Well, I'm starting to think that the C word is like the H word. So, which is hybrid, by the way. And I have a pet peeve with that word. And the C word is becoming to be that, here's the thing. Community strategy, the first question to ask is, does your community actually want a community? Does your tribe and your audience and your stakeholders want a community? And are you just building something for the sake of using the C word? I mean, that's the number one question that I would really raise. Is it something the C-suite heard maybe on a golf course or in a bar, and they said, hey, let's do this. It's our next shiny object. It's going to bring us a lot of money. It's going to bring us brand loyalty, blah, blah, blah. And they have no idea. The biggest challenge with communities is you have to really drill down the need for anybody to be part of a community. So if you look at Peloton, if you look at weight loss communities on Facebook or whatever, you get to see that there is a thriving thread. It's based on need, it's based on timing, and it's based on emotion. And I don't know if we are really tapped into What is the emotional like give that you want to have within a community that is just going to bring it to life? It's not a matter of, yeah, stick it under marketing. Oh no, it belongs to the events team. Oh no, it belongs to the content team. It won't work. It won't work unless you really decide, yeah, it could be a community. And what if it is 15 people on a WhatsApp group? That's your community. But you don't necessarily get up in the morning and say, you know what, 2023, we're going to have a community and it's going to make us a ton of money. We're going to sell subscriptions. It's going to like thrive. It's going to work on its own. We don't even have to touch it. That is a pipe dream. So that's my 2 cents.
I like what you said about the if it's even 5 to 10 people on a WhatsApp group, and it's something that didn't really register me. But even before the community thing, became the C word came up a few years ago. We have a show down in Mexico City. It's Automechanica, and that show, the attendants for that show are primarily mechanics, and these are guys. They're not very tech. They're not getting on, too many websites. Like even registration is mostly done on site, paid in pesos. Like, these guys don't really register on site. These guys are out in the shops. They're not sitting on a computer. So the marketing for those things have to be a lot different. And we learned that WhatsApp was a big, these guys really communicate a lot and use WhatsApp down there. And so we launched a WhatsApp group where we would, during the show, we would do some activations. We were texting them. So we learned it was easier to kind of collect their WhatsApp number than it was their email address. Mm-hmm. And so we were plugging these guys into that group, and it got so big that now that we actually had to start another one because we reached capacity for that WhatsApp group. But we were doing activations on the show where we'd say, hey, we've got, we're handing out some tequila during this time of the show at this, whatever. And these guys are going crazy and they're taking all the photos and they're sharing everything. And then it grew so much that then we were able to bring in other like kind of star mechanics, or if it's guys that were like really great with paint shops, and we would have them come in and host like just Q&A for an hour, every quarter or something like that. And it went crazy. And until you said that, I was like, I never thought of that as our community. I just, it's our WhatsApp group, but we've already kind of built a community, and that show is one that word isn't even brought up there. They're like, Chris, we don't even need an app. We don't really, it's very old school. Like, and they know like we're still collecting pesos. We don't. And, but it's interesting because that group actually does have already like a really strong community of it. And it's something that grew organically without us even thinking we're trying to build this huge pipe dream or, see where community.
Now, the secret is, how do you replicate that to all your other shows, right? And it's probably not going to be the same. It's just finding out what is the secret to making that one work so well, and then figuring out what the needs of the other shows, right?
Tequila could work.
Tequila
I'd
works.
happily join that.
Yeah, what time does that start, Chris?
Yeah, right.
I'll get you guys on the rest of it.
The other part of, so this is where we can do a better job of redefining what community means for your personas. That means you need to know your personas. The other thing is it potentially can be a group or a tribe that is not started by you. It could be started by someone else that is loyal to your event brand, that can actually bring that community. So imagine, so we have the women in event tech, for example. We're 800 strong. And my fault, my bad. We exist on Facebook, Slack, WhatsApp, and I don't know what else. So it can turn into a nightmare. But the best part about this is wherever we go, whatever industry event that's happening, once we tell everybody that we're going to be there, we can have a meetup. And they bring others with them. And that grows. And they become part of those channels. So that's the strategy. That's the opportunity. And that has to live somewhere and has to be promoted, especially through an event mobile app, through the website, etc. Because this is where you're going to bring in your first timers. This is where you're going to bring in your introverts that can't do shows on their own anymore. So you have to think of it in the sense of how you're building this group of people that have something in common, that have an emotional connection of some kind, and you bottle that energy and then you promote it. That's how you build the communities. Not thinking of it that you're going to make $10 million from the get-go. That's not going to work.
Yep, 100%. Okay, let's talk about revenue then. So this is something, so digital revenue was flagged in the survey as being one of the big opportunities. And we've got another poll here as well, actually, which we'd like to share with you. So what we saw from the survey was that 55% were expecting that their digital revenue is going to increase in the year ahead. As I say, I think that was fairly high, and I think that's given the fact there's so much media organisers who are included in the survey itself. But what I'd like to ask everyone here, and we've just shared the link in the chat, is where are you seeing the most success in terms of digital revenue? And when we talk about this as the panel in just a moment, I'd like you to sort of answer that from the perspective of a pure play event organizer. So I'm an organizer with an event. What are the most logical, low hanging fruit in terms of monetization? So some of the options here on the screen are content marketing, extending your exhibitors year round as part of a marketplace, webinars and other types of lead generation, on-demand content, which can be a source of subscription revenue, enhanced exhibitor profiles, audience retargeting, advertising, and the other one escapes me, email newsletters. So, Matt, should we start with you, please? So what do you think some of the most, in your experience, what's been some of the easiest ways to monetize an event audience through digital channels?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so at Raccoon, we launched a community platform. I think it was more of a content hub, so it kind of relates back to our communities and C words. But it was kind of, where was the opportunity? And the opportunity was actually in our subscriber list, in our email list. I mean, it was a couple 100,000, I think it was. And we had 50% plus open rates and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think like 50% open rates and about 7 or 8% click-throughs, which is incredibly high. And that was our year-round average. With everything else we were doing, from articles and top tips and guides and all that kind of stuff, the thing that brought the most attention was that email list. And it was quick and it was easy and it was, we can include you in the reach to our audience. So I think that bit's incredibly important. I think the other trend I've seen is with people like Tag Digital, so in that retargeting. So being able to offer retargeting back to exhibitors so that they can get more ROI year round, or when you release a new, content piece or a new feature of the show or something. I think that provides quite a real opportunity as well, because it's transparent more than anything else. They can see what impressions they're getting, they can see what clicks they're getting. So there's an element of building more trust around the digital offering.
So Matt, both of those things that you're talking about there, they're both digital channels which you're monetizing. So email newsletter, that is your actual email newsletter list. That's something there which has value. And of course, audience retargeting is another way of doing a similar thing, finding people when it lands on your website and then targeting them with ads. What types of creative, what types of message, what sort of things would you use on those channels?
How would you actually
what's an easy thing to communicate alongside when you're selling a booth, I suppose?
So for the organizer to sell, do you mean, sorry?
Yes.
Yeah, from that perspective, I mean, it's very, what we also found was sales teams that are used to selling stands were very good at selling stands and would quite often bundle in something on the digital side of stuff, which suddenly meant those selling the digital side of stuff had a really tough job pushing that value back up when they needed to rebook or something like that. So it was kind of actually getting those teams talking better together and working harder together, so that if a new contract came in on a show floor, then the digital expert was able to pick up the phone and talk to those people about how else they can reach that audience in a more direct way, or year round, or whatever the subject might be. Does that answer your question?
It definitely does.
Right.
Who shall I go to next? Chris, can I pick on you, please?
Sure.
What's working for you guys?
I agree that with Matt's point that we've had some really good success with the audience retargeting. So I think that's the biggest value that we can get. Like our biggest value is our audience. And so, these guys can go out and do Google ads and things and serve up retargeting on their own. But I think what separates us from them is that we can really drill that down to people that are only, been attending the show, or their lookalike audiences, or they visited our website. So we know that's the audience they really want to be in front of. The thing with that, where we saw a little bit of struggle, was just the education of that to the exhibitors. Some of these guys have never heard of retargeting. So we struggled with, like, okay, we got the booth sales. They're selling the booth space all day. That's what they're focused on. And then they're like, oh, hey, we have this thing called retargeting. You guys want to try that? And the exhibitor's like, what is that? And my booth sales guys doesn't really know what it is. So then they're like, I don't know, some new thing. We can get you more. So we learned that we need a little bit more time for education for the exhibitors on that. And to where maybe we're still kind of playing with this. Do we have somebody that's focused on all of these digital revenue opportunities, and they're the expert in this, versus the salespeople trying to do it? And maybe the salesperson makes that introduction, and then we can take the time to do that. So we're playing with that. I think that that's probably where we're gonna land at. But we've learned that we just need to take a little. It's not something that just because I understand retargeting, it doesn't make that. We put it on a sponsorship brochure, and these guys are going to buy it automatically. When it comes to low-hanging fruit, though, and what we've seen, like, just really for easy, is looking at things that are kind of unlimited. So it's like when I'm looking at the enhanced exhibitor profiles, or things like lead retrieval through the mobile app. What we've done is set up something that we're calling like the media package. And on some of the shows, we make it mandatory to where, as soon as they sign up or they build up their booth space, there's another, it depends on the show, $300 to $500 charge. That's their media package. And with that, they get, enhanced exhibitor profile. They can upload a video. They get the lead retrieval. They get, longer bios. They, things like that. But everybody gets it. They get put in the exhibitor search. All these things that they've been getting anyway. That is things that doesn't cost us any, extra money to develop. But we put that mandatory. So even if it's $300, if we've got 500 exhibitors at that show, we're generating an extra $150,000 off the rip. So that's where we've seen, like, just super. And you're going to have some that the problem was we had a lot of kickback from the show directors. So it was like me and kind of our CEO that was driving that a little bit. And they're like, no, these guys are already complaining about the booth space being up, and everybody's charging extra for carpet and all these things. And the shows that we ended up doing it on, though, it was really hardly any impact. I think what people are realizing that's just part of, fees. I think people are getting used to paying ticket fees and things like that. And if you can show them true value of all these things, it's not just like, oh, you get a logo, which they've already been getting in the directory. So you do have to take time and say, we're giving you better lead retrieval, where they're at the show and they can scan that in real time, versus the clunky gun that they were paying $300 to the registration, company to before anyway. And you can show those guys value. We didn't really get much pushback with those. We were able to generate a lot of revenue pretty much just by implementing that.
Yeah. That sort of thing does tend to be the most scalable way of generating revenue. I think there's a great comment here from Will Wise. In fact, Will has been making some really good comments all the way through, saying that the top reason why event sales people typically struggle selling digital is that often it's a different buyer. So if they're selling to an event manager or trade show manager, then they're not selling to the right person within the organization. So that's often an issue. Dahlia, what are your thoughts?
Well, just to piggyback on what Will said, it's not only that it's being sold to a different person, it's actually some business development reps are not savvy on how to sell digital, period, or how to start the conversation on how to bridge what's in it for the potential sponsor or exhibitor across the event portfolio. Piggybacking on what Chris was saying, the low-hanging fruit, the content can be sold differently, but it has to be designed and produced differently in order for it to gain more revenue for an organization. I think we need to ask and do better on how content is being produced. We're all content connoisseurs now and critics. to no end. So we need to do better with the design of the content, the delivery of the content, as well as the repackaging of the content. And I think there's missed revenue opportunities there. Then it ties into how you market it, what marketing channels you use that, and what you're charging for it, etc. But like even your usual speakers, especially when you look at healthcare and medical shows, you know, it's the delivery, as well as how do you just change it up? How do you educate even your sponsors and educate and exhibitors to potentially deliver like thought leadership pieces, not infomercials, and then you are able to put revenue to that as well. So I think we need to have like a real reset button. When we handle clients, even with webinars, we fully like take a look at their webinar, we throw it out the window and we start over, and it turns into a production. And I think that's where we lack the patience, as well as sometimes the expertise within organizations to say, yeah, it's much easier to throw up like 10 webinars a year and call it a day. But when you're asking money for it, then it becomes a challenge.
Completely. Okay, we're running short on time, so I'd like to ask all of you just quickly what your forecast is for the year ahead. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so we'll try and keep it brief, please. Miguel, could you start, please? What do you think is going to be important in the year ahead for the event technology industry?
I think it's important to create that seamless experience, make the support side of things really front and center, and just make sure planners are really well taken care of. It's going to be a tough year, I think. I think we ended last year with kind of a pent-up demand and a lot of events going on, so everybody's happy. But I think this year we're going to figure out where the industry is really at, and technology is definitely on everybody's mind, but I think everybody feels a little scared of technology. So it's an incredible opportunity, but also a big challenge to make sure people just feel really kind of warm and fuzzy about technology, which is always challenging.
Yeah. Matt, same question to you, please.
Yeah, I like the warm and fuzzy feeling about technology. I think there was a bubble that boomed, and now people want the comfort zone back. Obviously, I'm going to say something about content. It's what I do. But I think it's how or what sort of role AI plays in events over the next year, whether that's matchmaking, whether that's content creation, whether that's project management. I think it's been really interesting to see how it develops once the noise has settled down a little bit and people start to use it properly and effectively.
It's going to move fast, that's for sure. AI is just it's crazy. Chris, what do you think is going to happen? What's important?
Yeah, I mean, all the things we discussed today, I think, are on the radar. Being an event organizer, you know, the face-to-face event, the exhibition of what we do is the most important thing, and that's still at the center. So having that day of tool, the mobile app day of tool, being really spot on and working like it should, and it being seamless and bringing value to the attendees and exhibitors is what we're mostly focused on now. But I think also, and a lot of takeaway from this is paying attention to what your clients are trying to do. What are they actually trying to get out of the event and your brand, and how can technology help that?
Great, thank you. And Dahlia.
I do think that we have to take a look at the design of the experiences that we're putting together. And, you know, if 2023 is going to be anything different, it truly has to not say, you know, the goal of an organization should shift from we need to make our money back from before the Corona coaster to what's in it for our attendees and our stakeholders, and then place the emphasis on that, and then redesign. Obviously using technology as they can to learn more. And I know we've been saying this for a very long time, but if organizers don't get it right in 2023, then I think attendees will seek other places to go to for content, community, and all the good stuff that we've been talking about here.
Great. That's a great end. And we got there just within 60 minutes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Miguel, Chris, Dahlia, and Matt. It's been a really great conversation. So thank you so much for contributing. And thanks for everyone who has come in to view this. The reports and all of our ebooks can be downloaded from ExpoPlatform.com. So we'll be sending out the link to all of that for you. And the next Event Tech Forecast will be, I believe, streamed live from IMEX Las Vegas. So hope to see some of you there. In the meantime, please, you can digest any of this content and hopefully you'll find it valuable. Thank you for joining us.